Okay. All right, just here in the video. So welcome back everyone. So this is the climate change and social inequality. Week 13, so having more explanation. So you don't need to, this is the optional videos because you can just read over the background information lecture slide. And also this is the main lecture already posted on the Canvas website. But in case it might be very helpful to read over with me. So that will be that will be a kind of additional information so that you can have more information about this topic. All right, so based on the background information we already discussed in the class time, there were many types of the climate change, which is the very directly related with our survivability, right? So based on the carrying capacity of the Earth, we are relying on, also we are relying on the carrying capacity of the Earth. So in case if we are certain, so if we pass certain a point of the survivability or the sustainability, we might be in a very big trouble because the size of the hazard from the climate change or the abnormal weather, there will be a very big factor for our survivability. So these were four papers included in the lecture, but we will focus on the main story of the lecture as well. All right, so so what we wanted to aim was the learning objective. So explain how the sociology, as this is the sociology of disaster course, so we will try to analyze the social and political economic drives, the emissions, not just technology. So in South Korea, for example, there are many of the main structure of the economy. So there are many of the companies, they're using some types of the natural resources and natural energy, and there are the innate the mandatory the volume of the emission, even though we are trying to reduce or we are trying to strict the level. But what is the driver of that decision? So the technology or the political and economic and the actors of that society and apply the differential vulnerability framework, which is if there are more exposure, there are more suffer. And if there are more sensitivity, so sometimes some of the social groups and some of the individuals, they would have the more sensitivity and they would have the higher levels of the burden and higher levels of the outcomes. And then the divided as the adaptive capacity, which means if they have the more capacity because of their social infrastructure and their other types of the resources, they will lower down the size of the vulnerability or the negative outcome or other types of the outcome. So that will be very, very easy types of the calculation of the size of the outcome. And the global double inequality of who causes and budget who suffers it. For example, those who are already vulnerable, those who are in a very minor situation, probably they already have the inequality. They are positioned as the lower stage of the life and lower stage of the class of the society. And then after that types of the climate change, they are not very well prepared with the climate change and also they are very prone to those types of the damages, and they would have the lower and the slower recovery, and then they are under the pressure of the double inequality and the cosmopolitan society, which is not local, but also we are living no more in the local area, but we are living in the beyond the local. So that would be the local, what we learned in other classes as well, the global and then the state one. So we are trying to apply those state because we are living in the more monsoon weather. We have not lived in that weather a long time ago, but we are living in that one. All right, so which is 20% causes the 60% of the emissions. So that's very rough calculation, but we are trying to find it who are more suffering from the in the outcomes of the climate changes, but who are causing those types of the inequality or the climate issues as well. So the double inequality, that's the composition, the climate change runs two opposite inequality at once. Who caused the problem and who offers that? And inequality and planet scale, will try to find that. So from a flooded basement to the global atmosphere and across generations, we are trying to find that. So in one synthesis, the one argument. So if we try to make the one argument from those four papers in different topics. So climate change is socially produced inequality problem. Very alike with the other inequalities in societies and the disasters. We would believe that the climate change is causing many types of the inequality. So do you think that these are all random? Maybe not, as you learned so far, because those social positions that makes the people more prone to, more vulnerable to those types of the outcomes or those types of the causes and the outcomes of the climate change. So what socially knows that social drivers of the emissions and intersectional climate justice. And what hazard harms some far more than others. So exposure per the multiplied by the sensitivity divided by the adaptive capacity. So that will be a very interesting topic we can tackle. The double inequality, the rich cause it, the poor separate, polluting elites in the deadlock action, and beyond the national state. So we are not just relying on the nation only or the local only theories more. The climate change in the hierarchical and the democratic, the pure and believers. All right, so this is not only a physical one. So I'm not saying that there is this is only one. So there should be some physical changes as well. So the more emission and the carbon dioxide that causes the more the warming effect and the greenhouse effect. So that's true. So there are many of the natural factors impacting on that. But there are a lot of the social processes as well. So we are gaining more temperature and every year we are gaining more on the heats in the inside of the society and inside of the globe. And they are saying that so rapid and the far-reaching changes in the energy and the land, cities and the industry. So that was warned in the long time ago, but still we are encountering many types of the problems, including the cancellation of the treaties of the reducing the emissions of the greenhouse gases, and there are many problems. So the 16th century, the great killing of the indigenous in the Americas let farmland liberate the forest, which drawn down the CO2 and helped trigger the Little Ice Age. So it was in 16th century, not the BC or several million years ago. So the climate change can kill a lot of the people. So we are trying to see what are the mechanisms and what are the actors in these positions. And there are the two fields. Who are the drivers and why do society keep emitting and the justice who is harmed? So the why answers would be very simple, right? So because of the infrastructure and because of the economic system, the companies will need to produce the products, right? So there are factories, and we are enjoying many of the used goods, and our everyday life. These are so it is impossible to live without those goods produced from the companies and the factories. So we are trying to reduce and trying to keep the same level of the emissions, but there should be as so far 2026 in knowledge and on the science technology, there are the emissions of the gases. And who is harmed? So again, like with other disasters, it's not only the harming the poor people or the rich people in the same equal level, but there are some the variation, in the differentiations of the damages as well. All right, so the pollution affluence technology, that is the emissions and the another simple the calculation of the damages as well by emission. So building social networks field to estimate each driver's effect, don't assume it. So we are trying to mind that the rich nations are putting more and more the carbon dioxide and many of the greenhouse gases. So this is the treadmill of the treadmill of the production, which means there are many people, there are structural factors, which means that the capitalism must endlessly expand. So there are many of the people and many of the factors the expanding the size of the economy and size of the production. So there will be the extraction and the more the ways to grow. And reform thesis in theory is the ecological modernization and the environmental Kuznets curve. Stress rises with the growth and then falls with the wealth cycling up. So we are not sure which one is the more realistic or more better explanation, but we are trying to find that. All right, so the U.S. fossil fuel on the farms company, the conservative think tank that lobbying to the manufacturer doubt. The manufacturer doubt in the funding spread the polarizing taxes and the denial stronger in the U.S. than Europe farms. So which means they are trying to deny their responsibility. So they are the people. So they are the people trying to find the responsibility. But who are responsible for the emission of those and those things? So the fossil fuel farms, so they are gaining money. They're gaining money from those operations, but who are more responsible for that? So they are trying to deny their responsibility. Over 70% of largest U.S. corporations now report emissions in the country. So very, very large corporations are located in many of the developed countries. So the developed countries are producing more gases, but those who are living in the less developed countries or underdeveloped countries, they are suffering from those emissions as well. All right. So the meso is the middle level, and the micro level. So meso is the middle and the macro level. So this was the macro level, and the meso was in the medium level, and the micro level, the value and belief in who acts. So what kind of the attitude you have for the about the environmental justice? So the causal chain, value, belief, norms, action, this is the altruism, which means that it will be very fine. It will be very fine in the future compared with our the gases and our the anxiety. But which means that what would be the very big factor of that? So white women and people of color perceive more risk and are more concerned about the climate change than white men, and racial bias predicts the low concern over the above ideology. So this is not a big deal, but so because we would see that who are. So what kind of the values? So based on the value, you will decide to act and what you think about that. So that's the micro level, the actor driving the victim. All right, so the climate justice is international. So those who are immediately least have least policy influence and suffer most impact of all enabling across, which means um, like it's very alike with the rich countries are the pulling more the gases, but the less developed countries are suffering more from those types of the emissions. And those who are the racial minority and the other classes or the lower classes, the communities of color and the poor face more exposure and have fewer resources to adapt. So which is the ironical one, and they just amplify the segregation. The woman in color in the global south and among those who are more affected and through farming and the water and caregiving roles. But they are the least of the people. They are putting the least emissions of the gases as well. And those are native, so Native Americans and the Native Canadians, those who are living in the natively in those countries and those continents. So there are existential threats to the land, the livelihood, and the culture and the sovereignty removal from the ancestral and the ancestral arranged countries. And there are the peer of the people, the LGBTQ, the immigrated people, and disability. They are very, very excluded from the decisions as well. So is it more important to make a reform or a transformation? So there would be one possibility of the ecological modernization or the transformation, which means the more radical changes from the transformation. So which one is more important? We're not sure, but there are two possible pathways of the arguments. So monumental disasters such as Hurricane Katrina or the 1995 Chicago heat wave event reveal how pre-existing injustices are exacerbated by the extreme weather, by the Diaz shown in Whitney, so which is one main argument of this class as well. So these are also the reinforced and the reconfirmed from on the findings in those articles. So explanation of the differential the vulnerability. There are more exposure, right? Which in harm way caused the flood plain and the heat island, who depends on the what it hazard harms, crops, water, and health. So who are more dependent on in the hazard harms. So they would have more sensitivity. And if they have the more adaptability, so adaptive capacity, who can adjust, who have the more money, who have the more power in institutions, and who have more network and who have more voice, so they would have the better adaptability. So in case there are, which kind of the combination would produce the best or the biggest vulnerability? So we can see these types of the information as well. So access to the resources, not scarcity, but the distribution. Though usually, there are also the very debates that is the problem with the absolute volume of the resources or the distributional matter. So there are also on the many arguments that the distribution is a big matter, saying that structural racism determines the levels of the discrimination and the distribution and the caste and the gender and poverty. So these are also very big issues as well. And who is protected and who is ignored? So a space of the vulnerability, which is disaster hit the resource poor area and exploited and reducing vulnerability is the prima facie protocol. So that would be one of the very, very important on the mission of the country. So after the government they targeted after the heat wave, they targeted outreach to isolate elders caught deaths in the death heat wave. So there were also many of the regime debates that the elders, so just the older elders, they passed away, but there were no big damages of the properties. So that was why the 1995 the Chicago heat wave was not declared as the very big disaster, but they can work that they can make the more targeted policy to the helping the older adults who are isolated in the shelter or who do not have the air conditioning, very good air conditioning facilities. So there are many of the possible interventions as well. But also the Norfolk, which is the area with the very near to the sea, they built the sea wall instead of the relocating residents, the safe development paradox. So there were many more safety invites, more building, but the problem was the damages got much bigger. So there should be more resilient based one, and there are very careful approach about that. And how about the culture? How about the culture? So there are many of the gendered survival from the Yucatan Peninsula in the Mexico. So the woman died. So in many types of the areas, the woman died 3 or 4 times the man's rate. If from the learning to swim or the climbing trees, in the barred from the living hometown without man. And there was a tsunami that the carrying of the warnings about the generations, stone markers set above the reach of past tsunamis. And there are more, the brilliant survival. So there are vulnerability, if there are more vulnerability of the people and the groups of the people who are more vulnerable, and they would be very anxious about the situation. So these will be also one. The heritage and rules said that the non-conscious loss control heritage is non-economic rules and the damage. All right, so information is necessary but not sufficient. So when warnings fail, so Cyclone Gorky killed a lot of people in the Bangladesh. So nearly all had heard the warning, but 78% did not shelter. The prior is false alarm had the broken trust. So as we had mentioned that the social capital, one of the social capital is the trust to the society. If there are more and the failure of the society, there are the less the trust to the society, and many of the government policies would not be very helpful for that. And memory saves in the on Simon Island, oral memory of the 97 tsunamis at the resident of Hill within minutes in 2004. So there were many of the survivability. And there were many types of the other factors prevented from the bigger damages. So natural disasters are actually many types of the human disasters as well. All right, so double inequality means that there are the division of the richest and the poorest one. The richest are putting more, and the poorest are the suffering from the most. All right, so this is a very similar one. The world system series is in the polluting elites. So polluting elites at home. So U.S. Senate, there was the bird in the Hagel resolution passed 1990. So barring any treaty without foreign country cuts pushed by senators, but try to coal, oil, and others. But the bargaining, the positions are not the straight national interests. They are the interests of the whoever controls the leading export sectors. So those are inputting on the releasing more gases and the producing more gases, but they are usually the people decided by the politicians and the elites and follow the money and read the politics. So based on the world system theory, a nation's place in the global economy shapes both in emissions and negotiating stance. So those who are more stronger and the better position, which we are in the better position in the emissions and the power in the global economy in the position, they are trying to decide the game, the rule of the game. So there are many of the rich nations and the EU and the just countries, which is the Japan, US, Switzerland, and many other countries will permit a buy flexibility mechanism. But there are very small number of the countries. So the sizes are very large, but there are the very competing power as well. So island states demand drastic action. India, China insist on the per capita equity silent, and there are many of the debates on that. You want us to give up the riding the bus while you keep two people in the car. So they are trying to make the argument about that. So the global warming is all about the inequality, both in who will suffer most in effects and who are create the problem in the first place. All right, so the risk society, which means the modern makes its own dangers. So which means the local, which there are now no more local one. All right, so how about the Chernobyl and many of the financial crisis and the climate change? We are trying to manage it, but these are no more the manageable issues when the risks are getting bigger. Okay, so these are some of the bigger theories. So let me paste some of that. The list is supported in Onto the Future and the colonial chain. So there are okay. So the climate change is generating inequality poor and rich in the person, and that both simultaneously dissolves them. So that's the one. All right. So four papers in the glance. So you don't need to memorize the name of the theorists and the article names, but trying to find that. So which one is the core claim? Emissions are socially driven. Climate justice is intersectional. Least responsible to suffer most. And vulnerability is the exposure sensibility of the capacity and the double inequality plus the polluting elites in the fifth one, inequality and the decarbonized development. And beyond the methodological nationalism, side effects principle and hierarchical democratic. So these are ties to the inequality and the course. So the Korean one. So in Korea, so based on in the flooding and the many of the drowns of deaths that happened in South Korea as well. So if we try to manage that the equation to that case of the semi-basement in South Korea, so exposure and sensitivity and low adaptive capacity. The semi-basement concept of low income households are the lowest and the most flood prone points of the city, and the disabled resident and the single parent family who not escape in time. So why natural disaster? So if we just emphasize the natural disaster, then misleads the rain was extreme, the deaths were social. But housing policy, not meteorology, decides who lives in the bottom of the center. Climate change intensifies the rain, and inequality decides who droughts. So that would be a very big the big tragedy as well. And a strong type in Korea as well. This is possibly the human disaster After management announcement told them to move the cars. So nine residents drowned in the apartment underground garage. So because there was the notification that they had to relocate their car. But after management announcement told them to go there. But the problem was the warning they sent residents into the hazard in the governance failure, not a bad luck. And flooding was widely condemned as a man-made disaster, not simply the natural disaster one. So that would be one possible explanation as well. So you can read over those types of the inequality cases, I don't know, the disaster cases, and how that impacted on the other types of dishes as well. So these are the key terms as well. So instead of just memorizing those types of the keywords, but trying to adapt those in the types of the other types of the application of the theories will be very helpful for your final exam and others as well. All right, thank you very much for your attention and good luck in the remainder of your semester. Thank you.